I swear, I didn't think 6 tiny garden gnomes would cause a full-blown neighborhood crisis. But when I saw the envelope taped to my mailbox, bold red letters screaming, "Notice of violation," I knew Patricia Hendris. Our local HOA tyrant was at it again. She'd fined me $200 for unauthorized decorative structures. Decorative structures? They were gnomes, smiling, harmless little guys I'd rescued from a yard sale. I stood there in my driveway, holding that letter like it was a declaration of war. Across the street, Patricia was trimming her hedges with military precision, watching me over her oversized sunglasses. The woman lived for confrontation, and I could practically see her lips curl in satisfaction. "Morning, Jack," she called sweetly. "I see you got my notice." "Morning, Patricia," I replied, forcing a grin. "Yeah, got it. You really hate little guys with hats, huh?" She smirked. "HOA regulations are clear. No unapproved yard ornaments. It's about maintaining community aesthetics." That phrase, community aesthetics, was her favorite weapon. Last month, she fined my neighbor for hanging a bird feeder that didn't match the subdivision color scheme. Another guy got cited because his lawn gnome looked menacing. But my gnomes? They were pure joy, painted in bright colors, holding lanterns, smiling like old friends. The kids in the neighborhood loved them. So instead of paying the fine, I decided to get creative. If Patricia wanted to make a scene about gnomes, I'd give her a scene she'd never forget. I drove to the local hardware store, bought a truckload of concrete mix, steel rods, and paint. The cashier gave me a confused look when I mentioned I was building something monumental. That weekend, I started digging. Neighbors watched curiously as a massive foundation formed in my front yard. Patricia came by twice, clipboard in hand, demanding to know what I was building. I told her it was yard art, perfectly within my rights. She didn't like that answer. By day 3, the outline was clear. A towering 10-foot garden gnome, complete with a red hat and a grin wide enough to haunt Patricia's dreams. I sculpted late into the night, spotlight illuminating my masterpiece like a monument of rebellion. When the final coat of paint dried, it stood proudly over my lawn, casting its shadow across Patricia's pristine flower beds. The look on her face when she saw it that morning, worth every ounce of sweat. But that was only the beginning. The morning after I unveiled the 10-foot gnome, my phone buzzed nonstop. Neighbors texted laughing emojis. Some sent pictures posing with Big Red. That's what everyone started calling him. Kids from the next street came over just to take selfies. My front yard turned into a mini tourist attraction overnight, but not everyone was amused. Patricia's pristine smile cracked like a cheap teacup. By noon, she marched up my driveway with her clipboard in a fury that could melt steel. "Jack Morrison!" she barked. "This is an egregious violation of HOA Code 14B. Unapproved large-scale structures are strictly prohibited." I leaned against the porch rail, coffee in hand, trying not to laugh. "It's just a gnome, Patricia. A little bigger than usual, sure, but still a gnome." "Little?" she shrieked. "It's monstrous. You can see it from 3 blocks away." "That's called visibility," I said calmly. "Great for neighborhood morale." Her face turned redder than Big Red's hat. She scribbled something furiously on her clipboard. "You'll be fined $500 per day until it's removed." "Guess I'll start saving," I said and waved her off. That's when the real battle began. Within 24 hours, Patricia plastered the HOA bulletin board with a full-page notice titled, "Unauthorized Structure Alert. Community Devaluation. Risk." She even attached a photo of my gnome, circled in red like it was a wanted criminal. But something unexpected happened. My neighbors sided with me. Tom from next door printed shirts that said "Nach Team Gnome." Lucy across the street started selling cupcakes shaped like gnomes. Even old Mr. Carmichael, who hadn't smiled since 1997, set up a lawn chair to admire the statue every evening. Patricia couldn't handle it. She called an emergency HOA meeting. Claiming my gnome violated community harmony, I showed up with a slideshow presentation titled "The Cultural and Emotional Value of Gnomes." People laughed so hard that Patricia stormed out, halfway through. But she wasn't done. The next morning, I found 2 men in reflective vests in my yard, measuring the gnome. One of them muttered, "HOA hired us to assess non-compliance." When I asked for a work order, they clammed up and left. That's when I realized Patricia was planning something bigger, something beyond fines and notices. That afternoon, a letter arrived from the county zoning office. Official seal, bold letters, and one chilling line: "Structure under review for potential code violations." Patricia had gone nuclear. The county notice hit harder than any fine. Patricia had filed an official complaint claiming my gnome was a safety hazard and visual blight. Couldn't believe it. The woman actually dragged local government into a garden feud. I showed up at the county office 2 days later, letter in hand. The clerk behind the counter looked embarrassed. Mr. Morrison, we've had numerous calls from your HOA president. She's very persistent. Persistent, I repeated with a smirk. That's one word for her. Apparently, Patricia had submitted photos, measurements, and even a diagram, illustrating how the gnome blocked the neighborhood's aesthetic symmetry. The complaint was laughable, but the county still scheduled a hearing. On the day of the hearing, the room was packed. Neighbors filled every seat, many wearing Jotter Team Gnome shirts. Patricia strutted in with a folder thick as a phone book, her lawyer trailing behind. She looked like she was walking into a Supreme Court case. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I showed the panel photos of the neighborhood before and after the statue. I read a petition signed by 30 residents supporting Big Red. And then, I dropped the kicker. Every measurement, permit, and zoning code proved I was within my rights. The gnome met setback requirements, height limits, and structural safety codes. Patricia's jaw dropped. She'd expected chaos, not compliance. The county inspector leaned forward. So, to confirm, Mr. Morrison, your statue is technically legal? Every inch of him, I replied proudly. There was a murmur in the crowd, followed by applause. Patricia's lawyer whispered something to her, but she just sat frozen, gripping her papers like a sinking captain holding the ship's wheel. When the panel dismissed her complaint, she stood abruptly. "This isn't over!" she hissed. "The HOA will find another way." Outside, reporters from a local news station approached. Apparently, the gnome war had gone viral online. A clip of Patricia arguing about neighborhood aesthetics was already trending. That night, my driveway became a celebration zone. Neighbors brought drinks, kids waved sparklers, and someone even placed a tiny "Justice Served" sign at Big Red's feet. But as I was cleaning up, I noticed something odd. Patricia's house was dark, curtains drawn, lights off. And the next morning, my security camera caught her sneaking around my yard with a flashlight at 2 a.m. That's when I knew she wasn't finished fighting. That night, my phone buzzed at 2:17 a.m. Motion detected. I opened my security app and there she was, Patricia Hendress, creeping across my lawn like a cat burglar. She was holding a hammer and a trash bag, muttering to herself. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then she swung the hammer. The clang echoed through the night as she struck Big Red's foot. Sparks flew, paint chipped, and Patricia stumbled backward. She swung again, but this time the hammer rebounded, straight into her own shin. She yelped, dropped the bag, and limped away, tripping over one of the smaller gnomes she'd tried to confiscate. I called the sheriff's office, sent over the footage, and within 15 minutes, a cruiser pulled up outside her house. By morning, the entire neighborhood knew. The HOA president had been caught on camera vandalizing private property. When deputies questioned her, Patricia tried to spin it. It was a community enforcement action, she claimed. The gnome was an eyesore and a violation of order. But the deputies weren't buying it. One of them, a tall guy named Lopez, just shook his head. "Ma'am, this isn't a community meeting. It's criminal trespass." They issued her a citation and ordered her to pay restitution for damages, ironically to me. By the time the sun came up, Patricia's empire had crumbled. The HOA board, under pressure from angry residents and embarrassed by the viral news coverage, voted unanimously to remove her as president. She tried to fight it, but even her closest allies jumped ship. A week later, a moving truck appeared in front of her house. No one came to wave goodbye. The neighborhood changed after that. The HOA toned down its rules. People started adding small touches of personality to their lawns, colorful mailboxes, quirky statues, birdhouses, even a few more gnomes. Big Red stood proudly in the middle of it all, the symbol of a neighborhood finally free from overreach. One afternoon, as I was repainting Big Red's hat, a little boy rode by on his bike and said, "Mister, that gnome beat the mean lady, didn't he?" I laughed. "Yeah, kid. He sure did." The boy grinned, saluted the statue, and rode off down the street. As the sun set behind the houses, Big Red's shadow stretched long across the lawns, a reminder of how a simple yard ornament became the spark that ended an HOA dictatorship. And every time I walk past him, I can't help but smile. Because sometimes you don't need to shout to make a stand. Sometimes you just need a 10-foot garden gnome. Give this video a like for Big Red the Gnome, hit subscribe so you don't miss what I build next, and comment below, Team Gnome or Team Karen.